now. Cool. All right, so everybody's here today to hear some of the results and some of the activities that we completed during the kind of Catch the King Tide merger with the North Carolina King Tides program throughout the last several months. We kind of kicked off work for this, at least the events related around the King Tide in August, and went all the way through November with several King Tide events. And there's all sorts of good stuff and partnerships involved. So we're just going to dive right in. Just as a project, oops, I forgot I linked some of my photos. Let me be careful where I click. Just to kind of recover what this project is, where it came from. In 2022, NOAA, and we have several folks from NOAA on the call this morning, so thank you guys so much for joining, approached our organization, Wetlands Watch, to expand our regional tide mapping program called Catch the King, which is a program we run up here in Virginia, and we've been running it since about 2015, and we won a Guinness World Record for that work in 2017, because of the number of volunteers and data that came in. So we had a really great effort in Virginia. NOAA caught on and said, hey, project's pretty cool. Let's see if we can expand it into North Carolina. So we did a little bit of research into where we wanted to go with this project. North Carolina has a very high risk sea level rise and flooding. We understand there's a lot of tide monitoring work, wetlands migration work, and all of that wonderful stuff going on related to sea level rise. And me just having a little bit of bias, I'm a UNC Wilmington alumni, and I've been and lived through a couple of the hurricanes in the area. So I'm pretty familiar with how the flooding landscape looks, at least in Wilmington. And I've learned a lot since then about the other localities on the coast, especially thanks to Chris Voss's help with the Tides project. So it's been a really great learning project for me. And of course, a really great project for the North Carolina coast to kind of reinvigorate this. We, of course, did our homework before going into the state. We didn't want to just walk in with our project and drop it in the hands of willing volunteers. So I tried to do my due diligence and connect with any pre-existing efforts. And we did run into the North Carolina King Tides project, which was just an immense help for us to really get linked into the network of folks already doing some of this work. And we were able to kind of re-judge that volunteer network and promote the Coastal Observer app alongside our Sea Level Rise app. So it was a really great partnership and really helped this project sing. The project goals for this, and I mentioned this in a presentation way back when, but this was one, to foster partnerships between North Carolina and Virginia, especially for Wetlands Watch is a really small organization in Norfolk. It's really good for us to learn about what other folks in neighboring states are doing about sea level rise adaptation, climate adaptation, flood risk, and all of that great stuff. So it was really great for us to foster these partnerships. Building public awareness about sea level rise and flood risk is also a really huge component of community science programs. So we really enjoyed that facet and getting to kind of work with on the ground residents who are experiencing this flooding and have a chance to be involved and collect data. And that's that third bullet there, is just engaging them in the actual data collection and being part of teams that go out and collect data around the tides. This is also a way to kind of establish pathways for all of the data collected, and one of the big kind of parts that we're going to explore today, and something I'd love feedback from the folks who are on the call, is what are some of the ways that this data could be useful on the ground. This can really help inform us as we continue this project on, as we try to steward it in North Carolina, potentially expand it elsewhere. What are the avenues for the data to be used in those areas? What is the most useful use case? And then as well as what's the extended interest in doing this data collection long term? And so we'll do a whole feedback session at the end if you're just chomping at the bit to offer your ideas, which I hope you are. So far, and since June of 2023, which is really when the full effort of this kind of kicked in, we've been doing kind of preliminary research since I think March of last year, and just kind of having conversations with folks on the ground. But since June, we established interest in the project. Chris Voss published the King Tide calendar, which many of you may have seen. It had really great kind of color-coded point outs of all of the King Tides and the moon cycles, which was really great. We met and trained several interested groups. We coordinated efforts again from August to November. I believe there was 4 King Tide events in that phase. We held events in Wilmington, which was really awesome. Collected almost 2,000 GPS pins through the Sea Level Rise app and 92 Coastal Observer photos across 6 locations. And then, of course, today we're going to try to hold future discussions to pilot again, steward this project in North Carolina, and then any kind of use cases for visualizing the data, what would be most useful in that sort of thing. So that's what we've done so far. These are some great photos from some of the events that we did. This is Bonnie Mitchell at the North Carolina Coastal Federation at the Southeast office right there in Wrightsville Beach. We also got attention from this guy right here, who's really awesome. He is the founder of a podcast called Waterloop. I don't know if anybody on the call is familiar with him, but he actually covered part of our project in his podcast. So if you're curious, you can go Google Waterloop and you can see me talk about the project and sea level rise adaptation. So it was really fun. And then, of course, there's me. This one up here, we did a hybrid event with Plastic Ocean Project. This is Samantha. She helped me connect with Plastic Ocean Project. I volunteered for them when I was a student at UNC Wilmington, at least the UNCW chapter. So it was really great. We did a data collection and beach cleanup. We actually did 2 of those during the king tide season. So they were a great partner as well. Some of the things that you may have already seen or may be interested in, we released this flyer. This one circulated pretty much the whole time we were out and about doing king tide stuff. We promoted the king tide dates. We promoted both of the apps as well as their various training guides and websites and all of that fun stuff. And then if you're curious just to see some of those partners that were involved, we've got NOAA, Coastal Federation, Plastic Ocean Project. There's our apps there. North Carolina Sea Grant also was a great partner in this as well, helping us get funded and also helping us kind of advise on what folks are doing in North Carolina. So thanks for that. Some of the resources that we've been using, again, these are things you may have already seen and you've had plenty of time to spend time with. This is that king tide calendar, and there are plans to put out king tide calendars for this year as well as several years into the future. So we'll have this resource for us going forward. We also created this spreadsheet in the bottom left. This is something I would also love feedback on a little bit later on. This was just my kind of brain dump of all the locations and things that I was learning from folks that I was talking to about where it floods, where there are existing North Carolina king tide ruler gauges, as well as some other, I believe there were some digital gauges that some of these sites are related to, even though you can't go check the digital gauge. They're also just a great spot for flood data collection. So we created this spreadsheet. We also added in some of the peak tide times for the different king tide events. So just to guide your mapping. If you did not see this, this was a really great resource, and I plan on continuing to share this again for this season. So this will be a really great reference point for you if you are a volunteer who isn't sure where all of the locations are. This is just a really great spreadsheet to reference. So I'll make sure we share that again. So some of the results, and before, I'm not going to go into every locality and all of the fine details. All of these pictures that you're going to see on the next 3 slides are available on our website, and that website link will pop up on the last one. But I want to highlight what the different areas that were involved, as well as the data that was collected in each. So Onslow County, this is where North Topsail Beach is. And again, this is, I mentioned earlier on the call, Wendy, who is on the local government staff there. She's actually out checking for damages this morning. So it was really great to have her on the project. And Wendy, if you see this in post, thank you for all of your help. But she was actually the single volunteer in North Topsail Island and collected this many pins. And it was just absolutely incredible. Her data looked great. 8 Coastal Observer photos were submitted as well. Chris, I may have shorted a couple folks because the map and the filtering of the dates was a little bit difficult for me, but I'm pretty sure I found all of the photos that were taken during the king tide events. There were some, I mentioned which king tides in each locality these were collected, and there were some not related to king tide events that were collected, so that's not represented here as well. So people were still involved in Coastal Observer app stuff outside of king tide events, which was really awesome as well. Wrightsville Beach, and these are in order of how many sea level rise app pins were collected. So from most to least data. The quantity of data isn't necessarily the most important thing to take away from the project. It's really the quality of that data. But just so you can see what the participation was like in each place. That's what we've got here. So Wrightsville Beach, this was where we held a lot of our events. So it makes sense, 746 pins, 10 Coastal Observer photos. Coastal Federation, Plastic Ocean Project, and Waterloop all helped us with outreach there, which was really awesome. Carteret County also, again, this was a really kind of new area for me to explore in terms of flood risk. So I really appreciate all the folks, if you're on the call, who helped me explore Carteret County and the Down East, Beaufort, Morehead City area. It was really great to kind of see that firsthand. 143 pins, 46 coastal observer photos. And then some of the impact observations are really interesting too. So while I scroll through these, you can see some of the different notes that people added onto their data. Bald Head Island was another one, 94 sea level rise at pins, 12 coastal observer photos. Oh, and I want to mention in Carteret County, we had a lot of help, of course, from Chris Voss, Pine Knoll Shores Aquarium, and Coastal Carolina River Watch. I think I did see Riley, so thanks for joining, Riley. And then Bald Head Island Conservancy helped us out on Bald Head Island. So one of the things there was sea turtle nest washovers from the flooding. So this is just such a really great way for folks to document the flooding as well as kind of the impact to the ecosystem. Wilmington, we also did some data collection there, 66 sea level rise at pins, 11 coastal observer photos. One of the most interesting things to come out of this was there was a ton of data collected out at the battleship, the Wilmington battleship. And the parking lots were flooded. There were so many really great pictures of just how inaccessible for tourists this area was. So really just a wide range of those flooding impacts. And then Carolina Beach, 85 sea level rise at pins, 5 coastal observer photos. Jeremy, the Coastal Observer app photos, which I will show how to access a little bit later if you haven't yet. There are some really great photos of the flooding down in Carolina Beach. So if you haven't seen that yet, you should definitely check it out. But thanks to you as well for kind of informing us on some of those locations. I made sure those street level locations were in our spreadsheet. And so you can go see the data on our sea level rise app. That website, oh, did someone have a question? Cool. All of these data slides, as well as some more information about the project, is at wetlandswatch.org/catchthekingNC. This is kind of my hub for where I've been posting all of those resources. So if you remember that I sent shared a presentation slide or something like that forever ago, and you're wondering where it went, everything that I've shared should be on this website. So feel free to check that out. As for viewing the data, one thing that's coming soon, and I am going to click on this time, is uploading the North Carolina data onto the Virginia Institute of Marine Science model that we've been working with for Catch the King in Virginia. So it's not quite there yet. I just emailed our researcher again yesterday to see if we could get this up there. But essentially what Dr. Derek Loftus does out at VIMS, they have this base layer tide watch model, which is where this light blue shading is. And this is a 36-hour tide prediction model. It shows how much inundation is going to come in within a 36-hour window. The inundation shown here is on a king tide event. And then the different pin colors show the different years that these data were collected. I believe you can sort them, this little button up here, and you can sort through the years. So at some point there will be a Catch the King North Carolina 2023, and that will show up on the map. I believe he has the modeling to extend down to North Carolina as well. So we should see some of that kind of light blue juxtaposition on there. And I have a screenshot of it a little later to show you what that looks like close up. But in case you're
Gabby, can you say again, sorry for
No,
interrupting your flow, the size of the pin corresponds to what exactly?
The color of the pin corresponds to the year. The size of the pin is how much data was collected there. So if you see a really big pin, like if I zoom out and we look over in Norfolk area, this like blue pin down here, that means there's a ton of data in that small area. The Hague is one of those really popular areas in Norfolk. Good question. Thank you. So you can, this is a publicly accessible map. It's linked in this presentation slide, which I'll send you later, or you can just Google VIMS Catch the King and it should pop up with the website that this is posted to. So stay tuned for that. I'll share it when the data has been uploaded from North Carolina, and I'll let you guys know when that is there. So, oh yeah, okay, good. So I did do a good zoom in. So this is just, again, an area in Norfolk. So this is what it looks like. That base layer tide watch model is validated using our Catch the King data. So it will predict what's going to happen in that 36-hour window. And what Derek does is he goes in and he plugs in all of the Catch the King data we collected on the ground and actually essentially ground truths and fine tunes that model by showing, okay, this is where the model said it was going to flood, but our volunteers on the ground collected it either much further or much closer than it was predicted. So those are different ways that we can use that data. And then just another thing that I like to highlight when I talk about this project, I mentioned earlier that we won a Guinness World Record in 2017. We had 700 volunteers that year, and this was kind of our first really big push in Virginia. We had 122 this year in 2023, and we have such an incredible spread of data pins this year. And I like to mention this, and I think it's a really good visual just to show that numbers don't mean everything. More volunteers and things like that are not always the most effective part of a citizen science project. It's really about the quality and the value of the training. How many people can you reach? Finding the right kind of leadership coordinators and volunteer coordinators in the different regions to really recruit interest and help us carry the volunteers along. So it's more than just how many people are involved and how many data pins are dropped. Again, it's about the quality. And so I just think that this is a really awesome comparison. You can see the Eastern Shore. If anybody's heard of the Eastern Shore in Virginia, I'm sure you'd heard of Eastern Shore, Maryland. Flood risk is pretty high in those areas, so we're really proud to have a lot of data out there this year in Virginia. So to view the data, which might be a big question many of you have, for the Sea Level Rise app specifically, and we're going to go through both of the apps, the portal that we use is called searisingsolutions.com. And did I link this? Yes, I did. What you're going to see when you go to searisingsolutions.com is actually a login page. So if I sign out, oh, Warren, I see you sent me a friend. I don't know if Warren's on the call, actually. I don't know if I saw him, but I'll accept your friend request when I go back in. You'll see this little sign in button.
Warren is on the call.
Hi, Warren. Thanks for joining. You can come into this page and hit sign in, and it is the same email and password that you used to register for the Sea Level Rise app. I know that there is nowhere kind of on this first page, except for this little video down here that mentions the Sea Level Rise app. We're going to put in some work for some website development this year. But just know that you can use the same login, and you have to use the same login in order to view that data. So how you view it is once you sign in, you'll go to this regions button at the top left. And all of the regions that you subscribe to in the Sea Level Rise app should pop up in this column here. You will not see the millions that I have joined because there are several that I'm managing. You should see the 1 or 2 that you collected data in pop up here on the side. So let's go to Carolina Beach. This is the main region page. And then as we add more mapping events to each region, they'll all pop up here on this right-hand side as well. So you can click on the 2023 one here, and you'll see that map pops up right at the top. So you can go in and zoom in on the data and see where folks collected it. You can also do other things on this page, which we can talk about later as we continue the project. If there's interest in helping kind of lead these certain regions, if you have an interest in helping me recruit volunteers and lead groups, this is a really great communication tool. There's a wiki in here where you can add information on where you're mapping. You can upload files, pictures, maps, all sorts of things. You can see the list of participants here, and just a really great website resource for that. You may or may not see this export to Excel button here. Usually only folks with higher permissions inside the Sea Level Rise app, and in Virginia, it's program coordinators as well as tide captains is what we call them. People who help us lead, again, volunteer efforts and groups. They have access to export this data. This is something that is accessible to anyone who needs the data or has an interest in using the data. I can export this sheet for you. And then I don't actually know if I did a screenshot of it, but it essentially comes up with 4 or 5 columns in Excel that show the individual pins, their GPS point, who collected them, and some other unique information about the individual pins dropped. So those are all resources available on searisingsolutions.com. Again, if you want to go explore the data on your own, that's a really good place to do so. The other way that you can view data in the Sea Level Rise app, and I'm just going to hold this on the screen in case there's anybody wanting to do it on their phone right now. When you're inside the Sea Level Rise app and you're on the My Regions page, your regions should pop up here. And when you tap into it, you should see 4 tabs appear at the top. You go to mappings, just like you would be to join the event. You tap that mapping event that we did. And then this tab at the top called pins should show up. this is what you can tap. It will bring up this map here. And we actually did another update with the Sea Level Rise app recently. So this may look a little different than what you've seen in the past. The pins started to cluster because the app was getting a little bit slow to process all of the data that was coming into it. So we were trying to figure out ways that we could condense the data. And this was one of those ways by just condensing them into clusters. So you can still zoom in on each of these very similarly to how you would zoom in on a Coastal Observer cluster of photos. So that's there for you guys as well. And you can just do that straight through the Sea Level Rise app. So lastly, the Coastal Observer app, if you took any photos through there, you can go to coastalobserver.net/map. And there's a little filter button at the top left. And I selected, let me see if I can. Oh, I don't think I linked this one. Hold on. We'll just stick it right in. Yeah, so there's tons of photos in this project, and it'll start you up here in Delaware because that was where the project was founded. But if you scroll all the way down to North Carolina, and then again, I filter it for last year. And this is what I meant earlier when I was saying, I think that I captured all of the ones collected in our project, but I may have navigated this system wrongly, but I hope I did it right. So you can go around and you can zoom in on the different clusters of the photos. You can even just click on the groups and it'll zoom you in. So we'll go down to Bald Head Island and click on the clusters. And then they'll kind of stack them the further you get in. So you can click around and see what some of those photos looked like. So another really great tool for you guys to use. There are both pictures of just the flooding in general. Even I believe some folks took pictures pre-high tide and post-high tide. So I've been meaning to go back in and see if I can find more of those for comparison, because that is data that is really good to see the before and after. Oh my gosh, yeah, this one's, I think, Carolina Beach. Anyway, before I get carried away, really cool map to explore. Check it out for sure. And we'll keep moving. I'm actually going to pause there. Is there any questions so far on the data, viewing the data, any of the results? We're going to go through a feedback session, and there's going to be something that you can write on a little bit later. So stuff related to more general feedback we'll hold off on, but any specific questions on what I've shared so far?
I have a question, Gabby.
Yeah.
What happens or who uses the Coastal Observer? That's pretty much photos, and I think it can include photos of tide gauges. We have a couple here in Carolina Beach. Who uses that? How is that put to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Chris, did you want to come on and explain more of that? I'm not sure I would capture it well.
I can. We
Thank
have
you.
captured photos and videos actually on different methods in the past. And as the project really finished and there was no additional funding, we picked up some interest from the Delaware group, and they basically hold all of those photos. They also collect the water level data that we've collected. Again, our gauges measure the vertical extent of flooding. We have folks in certain areas that would actually measure on a daily basis water levels, but then during king tides or even exceptionally low water levels, they would measure. So there's data in addition to photos. Some of it is on Coastal Observer, and some of it is actually in historic databases. And as a project, we are working on trying to coordinate all of those data since the project's inception in 2015 into one place where it can be pulled.
Okay, thank you. Christine, since you're on, are you going to be putting together a 2024 King Tides calendar similar to the NC 2023 calendar? Right
Absolutely.
now,
Absolutely. We had a calendar created and I found an error in it. And so we're actually meeting tomorrow to correct that. I believe the first King Tide is not until later in the spring. So we should be okay. But yes, we are. It's basically, ours is now a group of volunteers only. I myself am retired, so we are trying to just keep things going with a shoestring. But yes, we plan to maintain calendars every year.
Thank you.
Great questions. Thanks, Warren. And I just went back to this slide. I meant to mention it earlier, but yeah, one of the really great things about the partnership with North Carolina and King Tides was that the sea level rise app collects this kind of tidal extent and the flood extent data. And then the Coastal Observer app and the North Carolina King Tides project at the ruler gauges collects that water level depth. And so we get this really nice complete picture. In the future, it would be really cool to get a really synchronized effort of water level and flood extent at those locations. And that's why we included the ruler gauge locations in our spreadsheet, hoping that some folks would do both at those sites. And we did get a couple of those, especially in Carteret County, I believe. So more of that in the future to come, hopefully. Let me go back to my slide. Any other questions before we move on to just full on feedback?
Yeah, this is Luann. I'm
Hey,
just going
Luann.
to mention, I'll post a link. When I found out about the North Carolina King Tides project long ago, when they had an older app that they were using, and started looking at the range of apps people were using. And with a Sea Grant person in Woods Hole, Steph, her last name's escaping me, but we compiled a database of the different things people were doing. And this is how I really became aware of Wetlands Watch. And we looked at the range of things. What I'd really love to do is a needs assessment to people like floodplain managers to find out which data they are really looking for and how we can help them get it. And full disclosure, in an ideal world, we would actually take this to inland locations as well.
Yes, absolutely. Rainfall flooding inland is increasing. I believe the three terms there is increasing in frequency, duration, and there was another one, intensity, due to climate change. And so a lot of our mountain riverine communities are seeing a lot of flash floods, and we would love to take the sea level rise out there. It takes a little more work to find that champion on the ground who's willing to kind of rally their volunteers during a rainstorm and throw the muck boots on. Luann, you actually had a really great idea, and this is something just to think about with general feedback of monitoring rack lines. If there's any sort of rack line from riverine flooding, maybe that's something that we can go out and collect data on. But yes, flooding inland is no secret and is something we absolutely should be collecting data for. Are you going to drop a link to the database you made, Luann? I think that would be a great link to share. Sorry, I didn't put it in the presentation.
Yeah, I believe I did.
Great, thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Luann. I'm going to just chime in and say, yes, I know that when our project was coming to an end, we were finding the connections to researchers and other coastal, floodplain managers is really key. And that is a step that I think is just super important. And we have done some of that, but I think that there is really a great need to find this data set collected by citizen scientists is certainly unique. We found that a lot of our locations actually went from our King Tide gauge, and they realized they needed even, regular or I'm going to say higher quality water level data, the NOAA 6-minute standard, and they've done that. But as far as public outreach and communicating with people, the gauges were very helpful. But another thing for the folks, who are collecting the data, they really want to see how these data are used. And the data sets are picked up by different groups from different times. Primarily, it has been research, but I think communicating through news organizations and other coastal, I'm going to say agencies, the imagery we found is amazingly important, but the data are extremely important as well.
Yep. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, great mention. And I did present on this project to the North Carolina Association of Floodplain Managers. I couldn't make it out in person, but I recorded a presentation for them. So I know we may have reached a few folks there. They may not have reached out to me yet, or maybe planned to and forgot. But we did do that, which was good. Hoping to see maybe someone pop in my inbox someday about that. As well as I was able early on in the project, and I haven't checked to see if any folks from the Department of Environmental Quality for North Carolina joined us, but they really had an interest in the data as well and helped me find some flood locations early on. So definitely an avenue to explore those conversations with folks who really use this data for planning and implementation and development is really critical, and I think a huge next step of this project. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So we'll kind of switch gears and start talking about the data use and everything we've kind of just segued into. I wanted to frame it in this particular kind of sector of the world because it's something I'm interested in. It leads me into some of the work that we do at Wetlands Watch, but this is not the final scope that we're looking for feedback in. One of the questions that I like to ask is, how is participatory science valuable at the community and residential scale? And I pulled out these two photos. One is from Chris. This is a great photo of your own backyard, if I'm not mistaken, right, Chris? This one
It's
here?
actually a friend's backyard.
Friend's backyard. Okay. Oops. And this is just a scene that we're seeing a lot more on the coast, even up here in Virginia. A lot of residents who bought their coastal home and have this beautiful wetlands view. And the wetlands have decided to start making a home in their own backyard because that water level is coming in so high. And of course, your backyard is just drenched all the time. So we're dealing with this issue. How are residents responding to sea level rise and flooding? What does that image look like? Can we leverage folks who have this much risk to start documenting what's going on in their backyards using something like our apps? How do we tap that network is a really good question. The other side of things is, of course, public infrastructure and community spaces and areas for recreation and all of those things at the community level, things that residents are really passionate about: green space, natural open space, places to view the coastal ecosystems. And so this is a picture that was taken, I want to say this was also Carteret County, but it's mistaking or escaping me now where it was. I believe this is a storm drain right here. So this is another issue of that sea level rise flood waters coming up through storm drains. This is something that could be incredibly of interest to local government staff, to folks who maintain these storm drains and all of that, transportation, DOT, all of that. So how do we tap that network of folks who are monitoring these spaces? How do we kind of document more inaccessible recreation spaces? Like I mentioned earlier, the Battleship in Wilmington was an area that was just really flooded out. And we got really great photos of that. So can we take that to the next level and say, okay, something needs to be done to mitigate flooding in this area if you continue to want this area to be a safe space for folks to be at? So just something to kind of think about visually. Again, as Chris mentioned, the photos that come out of this project are really an incredible tool for us to engage with volunteers through. So that's the frame. In terms of Wetlands Watch program area interest and things that I've been working on at my organization and kind of what we're working on more broadly with Catch the King data is starting this kind of signs of change campaign is what we're calling it. What are those visual indicators that might not be the most visual indicator of sea level rise as the water lapping at your doorstep, but things like salt bush growing out of storm drains, things like the lone sycamore tree that was meant to just be a really nice aesthetic addition to the coast, but saltwater intrusion is destroying its ground. These backed up storm drains. This photo here is actually from a property with a conservation easement on it that's supposed to allow these wetlands that are bordering their fence to migrate inland. This is their front gate. So they've got wetlands coming in on this side. There's a huge inlet right over here, and it kind of loops around the front of their house. So they've even got flooding on their front doorstep. So documenting those things and talking to those folks about what they're most kind of concerned about and things that they can do with their property to help mitigate flooding is a really interesting one. And then we call this alligator pavement. There might be a more technical term than that, but this is also evidence of saltwater damage on pavement. So it gets into these cracks and dries it out and actually splits it. So finding evidence of this is just another kind of visual way we can look at sea level rise and not just focus on kind of the GPS data collection or the water level data collection. We're going to start steering our residents to open their eyes and actually document some of the other changes happening with sea level rise. In Virginia, I wanted to point this out because these are just opportunities that we can explore in North Carolina as well moving forward, and anywhere else we take Catch the King. A lot of the groups engaged are very volunteer forward or education forward: Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Montessori schools, other up to the university level of students. And then as well as some of our utility companies, public media, Master naturalists and master gardeners are also really great groups to tap for volunteers. That's something that I didn't see much of in North Carolina, but I am sure they're out there and we just didn't have the immediate connection with them. Friends groups. So if there are any friends of the Cape Fear River, friends of the, whatever water body you're interested in collecting data in, those groups are usually really enthusiastic about that. Some master gardeners also have shoreline evaluation programs, or they're participating in something like that. So they have a little bit more experience doing water level documentation on the shore. So these sorts of networks are ones that I want to tap and things that we could definitely connect with in the future and look into. And these were some of the snapshots from Norfolk Catch the King. Another interesting thing that came up in Virginia, which is again just showing examples of things that we could do in North Carolina or creative ways we can start engaging the public on this. We captured a lot more data on the Eastern Shore this year, and this was just a really great help from some of the folks doing equity and environmental kind of equity work on the Eastern Shore. They actually tabled at this big bike event that happens out on the Eastern Shore annually. And it just so happens that they typically schedule this bike event during a king tide. So much so that when we approached them with the idea to promote our project, they said, oh darn, did we schedule that on the king tide again? There's going to be a bunch of flooding. So it was really great to fully connect with them and actually get out there this year. And we created a map with flood locations along the bike route. And so folks came and they picked up a little information card. It looked like this one on the left that showed them all of those locations. And when they stopped to rest at each of these areas, they got out, collected sea level rise app data, hopped back on their bike and kept going. So it was a really cool way to kind of merge public awareness with the project and actually engage people who deal with flooding during an event like this. There were volunteers who were very familiar and were hoping that it wasn't going to flood at all the areas that they wanted to rest and stop. And then this is just a zoom in of what some of that data looks like out there. So really cool kind of segue. And then we're working this year, one of the things that I'm leading in Virginia is actually working directly with an 8th grade program. And we took them out during a king tide this year and they got super wet. Don't recommend walking through floodwaters. They're very icky, but they're middle school students and they don't listen. So we did a lot of data collection. We did water quality as well as sea level rise app data. And they had a really great time and got to learn a lot about how flooding was impacting Norfolk. This whole area over, I think, the hour that we were at this boat ramp went from bone dry to like this lake that you see in the photo. So the kids were really impacted by that and were able to see how effective it was. So we've reached the time, and this is exactly the time that I wanted to have for feedback. So this is great. I'm going to do something called a jam board, and I'm actually really excited about this because I've been seeing it pop up in a lot of my trainings. So what I'm going to do is drop this link in the chat, and we're going to kind of do, oh, let me actually check the chat to make sure that no, oh, hi, Marika, I'm glad you're here. Okay, cool. Yeah, on the front lines, David, definitely. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss any questions. So there's 2 ways we can do feedback. We're going to kind of have an open discussion, but also if you want to pop into this thing, it's called a jam board. And it is a way that you can click on any of these sticky notes, you double click it, and it will pop up so you can add text. So if there's anything that you want to just pop in here for feedback, things you enjoyed or went well for the project, things that you think need improvement or consideration for the future, things that we might have just missed out on, or if you didn't get enough training, or if you think that the training was confusing, anything like that, open to all suggestions. And then ideas for the future. This can be anything from how we leverage the data, who might be interested in helping us steward the project, coordinate volunteers, all of that great stuff. So we'll keep this open, and I will also leave it open for just general discussion, and anything that you want to just discuss out in the open, I'll go ahead and plug in here while we're talking about it. So if you want to do talking, you can talk. If you want to do typing, you can type, but don't worry about talking, not getting on the form, because I will plug it in. So I will leave it there. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for that long and through all of my talking nonsense. We'll leave it open. Any thoughts, ideas? Working with the Sea Scouts. Oh, that's cool. Does anybody want to, what is the Sea Scouts? That sounds incredible. Needs assessment for floodplain managers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Gabby, I put the Sea Scout thing in there.
Nice.
They're affiliated with the Boy Scouts, but they're like Boy Scouts that do boats and stuff like that and coastal stuff. They include both boys and girls. And instead of being a troop, they call themselves they're organized into ships. But they
Oh,
are
cool.
we work with them, and they're definitely somebody that would be interested.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Sea Scouts, I want that to be a thing up here. That's really awesome. Oh, thanks for the shout out. I had lots of help, and I can't thank everybody who helped me enough. It was a really awesome kind of project for me personally, as well as, of course, organizationally. So. And if you run out of sticky notes, you can add a new one. There's this little sticky note button on the left-hand side, or you can just, if you see nobody's writing on these, you can click and drag if you would like.
Hey, Gabby.
Hi.
Hey, this is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah, just some general. Here, I'll turn this in. My video works. There we go. There we go. Yeah, just some general comments. I want to say, thanks for reaching out. To the North Carolina group. I think this is a really good teaming opportunity. I think what I've seen in the years that I've been involved working with Chris and is that every state seems to they have their own group that's doing their King Tides program.
Yes.
Or project. And then, so not only do you have, each state doing their own thing, but then each group has their own app that they're using for collecting data. What we found is, there's a number of states that are using the My Coast app, which is a great app. I mean, it's really a great app, but there's also a cost to using that app, which we found wasn't going to be able to work with a very limited budget that we had for us. So we found the Coastal Observer app through the Delaware group, and I think overall we've been pretty happy with what we're able to get out of it.
Good.
Just some general things, what I'm seeing. So I am sort of the pseudo manager of the North Carolina King Tides Facebook site. So kind of getting in the social media side of things. And I do see a lot of activity on there. One thing that I've seen probably the last couple of years is right around this time, usually, before we get the King Tides calendar published, is people are reaching out and they're asking, when is the King Tide calendar going to be published? Because they are looking to plan their summer trips to the beach, and apparently they want to avoid the times when there is a King Tides just due to the impacts of the beach. So I guess kind of you could add that to what are people using this data for, or this information for, is planning their summer trips to the beach.
Yeah.
So I've had probably the last 2 years, I've had people reach out usually before the calendar is published, saying, hey, when is the calendar going to be published? Because we're trying to plan our summer trips to the beach, and we don't want to be down there when the beach is going to be underwater.
That is a great thought. And Jeremy, if you're still on the call, I know that you've shared from the town side of things. Have you shared the King Tide calendar before on the public level? I forget if you had said that specifically before, and maybe he's not. I have to check that he's still on.
Yeah, we have, and we try to get that out through our Facebook town page.
I think that would be
on our website.
Good. Yeah, that's great. If we could tap more of those kind of town or city staff that manage social media, things like that, I think we could do an outreach push with the calendar and say, hey, make sure you let your residents know when the king tides are coming in so their beach trip isn't ruined. I think that's a great angle, Dan. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we try to get it out to property managers to let them know and let their tenants know they're coming in about that as well and what to expect. And also, the calendar is very valuable because when we have special events, we rely on that calendar. And when we have people approach us on, beach soccer tournament or whatever, have you, that is a definitely handy tool.
Great. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot so much, Jeremy. I appreciate it. That's great.
Well, hey, Jeremy, I know Chris, I think mentioned earlier, but the King Tides group, we have a call tomorrow to go over the calendar, just kind of answer some questions that we have that were raised regarding the calendar. But we're hoping to have it out here soon.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. Yeah, and I will for anybody who has not been on the email thread that I've been sending around, that's something also that I would love feedback on. Is a large email thread the most effective way for me to do this? The other, I could see if I could create a newsletter through our Wetlands Watch page, although we're trying to reduce the number of newsletters we have and not increase them. If there's a better method for communication for this, please drop any ideas. Email was just kind of the most umbrella, capture everybody way to do it. It lets me attach all of the calendars and flyers and post updates. If there is any way to do more outreach on that or better outreach, please feel free to drop that in this board as well. But generally, I will continue to do a big email thread. If you have not been on it, I will make sure everybody who is on this call is on the next one. I'll send out a recording of this presentation and the slides in that thread. So anybody who has not previously been on, you will be on that. And that will start our new kind of 2024.
Hey, Gabby?
Yeah.
Gabby, another question. In Virginia, do you guys does Wetlands Watch organize like site, I want to say site trips, but going out with a group, it could be a small group, whatever, during a king tide to kind of, I mean, I know you have your volunteer groups that are out there collecting data, but do you do just like an outreach tour to kind of go out with the group and do a walk around a neighborhood or community that typically sees high water during a king tide event, just to kind of have an opportunity to talk to the public and engage in conversations where they are seeing the high water right there. Because I asked that because through the North Carolina King Tides Facebook site, we're also connected to like some of the King Tide groups on the West Coast, like the California King Tides groups and the Oregon King Tide groups. And I've seen recently that they were organizing, again, little trips out to the beach during King Tides.
Yep.
Again, it kind of as an outreach, just to kind of help continue the conversation and I guess bring people out there so that they can kind of see firsthand, some of the impacts to the marsh or to the roads. Many times in communities, it's like what roadways are being impacted when the high tides come in. So I just wanted to ask if that was something that you guys are doing with Wetlands Watch.
Yes, that is a fabulous question. We do very ad hoc, what we call flood tours. And this is typically with Sometimes we'll do it with legislators. Sometimes we'll do it with public media stations. Occasionally we'll do it with the interested resident. This was a lot more of a common thing under our previous executive director, Skip Stiles. But we are starting to do them a little bit more on a very ad hoc basis. But that's something that I never thought about doing as part of the Catch the King program, is maybe part of the training or part of the, hey, get acquainted with the work that we're doing, come out to this flood tour, because we certainly take everybody to the same like 6 main flood locations that show really strong evidence of sea level rise impact, saltwater intrusion, wetlands migration. We're exploring a lot more of that public engagement too in very programmatic ways, like the education work I'm doing with the 8th grade capstone. We're getting those students out to go see a ghost forest for their first time. We're getting them out during flood events and things like that. So trying to incorporate it better into our program areas. But I really like that as an idea, and part of this project is to actually get folks out there and to see those areas. And we want to document them more anyway. So to get residents out there and start noticing the signs. And like I mentioned, that whole Signs of Change campaign with all those different photos of the salt bush coming out of the storm drain and the alligator pavement. We need more documentation of that so that we can take these really awesome photos and data up a level and say, this is what's going on, and this is where it's needed. So great question. And I think that's something we could totally explore. And something I think maybe some of the organizations we worked with might be interested in helping co-host, like the Coastal Fed might have some sites that they want to visit. And then we can go see a living shoreline and say, hey, this is one example of adaptation. Awesome. Really awesome participation on this board, y'all. Thank you for that. I'm really excited. I will also screenshot this and share it with folks if they're interested as well. So we'll have this on deck, which is good. Let me just read through them and see if there's anything I want to ask for.
Yeah, we're definitely interested in sharing this information. I also just wanted to reach out, and as far as the King Tide calendar, we're open to suggestions. I know that we used to use, say, arrows at the ends, if you will, of the highest water levels, just to try to indicate that this is kind of a gradual thing. You know, the moon phase and perigee are gradual. It doesn't, you don't just wake up and it happens. And I don't know if that's kind of helpful to indicate, but we generally try to indicate King Tide when the water level actually meets, generally when it meets a threshold. We happen to use the Beaufort station, but also we has to be a perigee and spring tide as well.
Yeah, good point, Chris. Thanks for that. Yeah, if anybody is interested in more detail behind the King Tide calendar, we can probably send out some information on how it's devised, if that's of interest to folks. It's a really awesome tool. It's really great. I'm glad that we have one in Virginia too. It's good. Although we usually put ours out in like August. Hopefully we'll do it earlier this year. Awesome. Any other thoughts, comments, ideas? I am just stunned with how well timed this meeting has been. Normally I'm like, talk. Oh shoot, it's 10:55.
Gabby, this is David here in the Climate Program Office. Yeah, congratulations and kudos to you and the team. I mean, this is really impressive, everything you've shown and shared here. Very
Dave.
pleased to see it. A couple of thoughts, in the, there are analogs, for example, urban heat island mapping. And one of the things that I really admire about that program is a lot of the local hosts have been very good at sort of pivoting when data collections were made and maps were produced, is segueing over to dialogue with, say, city officials as well as the residents. So kind of bringing residents to the table into conversation with city leaders or community leaders to say, what does all this mean? Where's this going? Are there actions we need to be considering to protect people, property, and infrastructure, and that type of thing? So just to start the conversation. So I don't know if there are those types of add-ons or extensions of this type of program that you're considering. Sarah and others here in this call may have some thoughts about entree or ways that could be done. And then, of course, in coastal communities, it's not just the high tide, as you know, and everyone here knows. in a lot of our communities along the coastline, especially in coastal Carolina, we have very poor stormwater drainage systems.
Yep.
And so it's also the stormwater and where it can go and where it's standing. And so you might consider extending the scope of your project to also be able to address that more purposefully, because that's another key consideration. Not only what are we doing, to understand and monitor our coastline, but what are we also doing to understand and optimize where our infrastructure is in need of improvement.
Yep.
Again, to protect people, property, and infrastructure. So just a few thoughts I thought I would offer for your consideration there.
Yes. Thank you, David. Yeah, those are really great. I think generally the hope is that we can start engaging the folks at the site, residents too, lots of residents. We want to engage them for more data collection in general, but finding the city officials or the agency staff that's working on the ground in the localities who have familiarity with flooding or maybe know about it but haven't really looked into it, bringing to something to them like stormwater infrastructure and the storm drains and saying, hey, you've got all of these kind of backed up storm drains that's causing flooding beyond just that site of the storm drain. Visuals and stuff like that are going to be really important to facilitate those conversations. So maybe we can, if anybody has ideas on it, on how we can tap that network of the city officials and agencies, I can do ad hoc outreach to each city town and see if there's someone who jumps on ship like Wendy did in North Topsail. And maybe I can even just touch base with her and see how this data could be beneficial to city officials. What is the use case for it? Of course, we know several ways that it could be useful. But I would love to put together a list of folks that have a higher up interest in what does this data mean for the locality. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you, David. And if anybody has thoughts on that or knows of anyone in some of the places that we've been collecting data in that would be interested to see it, that would be great. And I will put that in the report as well, David. We'll scope out some of that in there.
So, Gabby, is the plan then to continue this in 2024?
Yes.
The project? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and there's still, I believe this funding goes through August, if I'm not mistaken. Frank, I know you're on the call. I think it's August, and we have some funding left to continue, even just with what we already have to keep stewarding this and talking about it. So yeah, we'll keep working on it. Good question. All right, well, since we're coming down to 10:59, I just want to thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick so I can see everybody. Thanks so much for those who've been involved in the project, for all of the outreach help. Bonnie, I see you on the call. Thanks for all of your help helping coordinate events in Wrightsville Beach. And we will continue the conversation. Again, I'm going to send a follow-up email with everybody on this call, on that thread, as well as everybody else who's been on that thread over the last several months with the recording and the slides. And then once we get the new King Tide calendar out, we're kicking it up again. And I know there was interest. It's just, of course, a very busy early year, but there was interest in doing some data collection with the big storm that just rolled through. So maybe we'll keep an eye out for more of those over the next couple of months. Seems like we may have a wet close to winter. So if we have more opportunities to do that sort of thing, we can just keep kind of stewarding the project a little bit until the King Tide season starts to ramp up again. But anyway, thank you guys so much again. If you have any other questions, comments, feel free to reach out to me. My email will be popping in your inbox sometime soon. So thanks, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks.